Hey guys, welcome to another Sales Wisdom podcast. We have a cool founder with us today. His name is Adam Baker, a veteran. He's CEO of dealpad.io. We're going to talk about sales, startups, everything in between. Adam, welcome to the pod. Tell us a bit more about yourself and about Dealpad.
Thanks, Charles. Great to be here. So I'm based in New York. I'm from London, as you can tell from my accent. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Dealpad. My background is essentially in software sales. I've been through Intuit and Salesforce and the chief sales officer at three 70 million ARR SaaS companies. I have also founded three of my own software companies with two exits, currently working on Dealpad.io.
Tell us about your exits. A bunch of founders think it's life-changing. Was it life-changing? What was next? Were you seeking the next opportunity, the next mountain to climb? Tell us about these exits.
Yeah, I think the definition of life-changing is obviously very subjective. I think that it's impossible to go through an acquisition and it not be life-changing, whether it financially changes your life or helps you grow, helps you become, more experienced, more knowledgeable. It definitely changes your perspective on things. My first exit was bigger than my first. My first exit was bigger than my last. That was pretty good for me. It's enabled a lot of things. It enabled me to bootstrap my last company. It's enabled me to bootstrap this company, Dealpad. But I don't think that any founder should ever go into a startup thinking they're going to build a business to exit and to change their lives. I think having an exit route is always good. A lot of people don't want to build lifestyle companies, and particularly if you're raising venture money, you don't want to be building a lifestyle company. But I don't think you can ever go into starting a company wanting to change your life, because if it does, if you do, it's very unlikely that that's going to happen. You've really got to be passionate about the problem you're solving, and be invested in solving it properly, and that's how you build a business that could potentially change your life at some point.
Right. And how do these exits came about? How did you got under the radar of these folks that acquired you? And how was the process? How was the courting process? Who made the first steps? Was it collaborative? Was it stressful? Tell us about that experience.
Yeah. Both of my acquisitions have come from customers. And so we had a large customer. They were an ad network that were using our product. They also became a partner. And so at some point they started to resell for us as well. So they were a good accelerator for us. And they then decided to acquire us about 3 years into that partnership with them. We'd been going for about 6 years at that stage. And the second was the same. They were a partner of ours, a customer, and we'd been working with them for a while. And they wanted the technology that they were licensing for themselves, essentially. So it was the Guardian media group. They'd just raised a ton of money from their trust that they're part of, to invest in user-generated content. And as part of that strategy, they wanted technology like we had, to better help them execute that.
So what was the MRR of these business? Was it around the $20 million ballpark, or?
Yeah, it was lower than that. So the first company, MRR was about 1.4 million. And the MRR of the second company was a lot lower. It was about 400K.
Hey, that is like a 20 to $60 million acquisition, if the ballpark's correct.
The first one, yeah.
Okay. Were you, how many co-founders did you had in these businesses, and what were their respective roles?
I didn't have co-founders. This Dealpad that I'm working on now is the first time I've co-founded a company. I was a sole founder on both. So we had shareholders. We had our team were invested, they had equity, but I was the only founder.
So to me, that's the definition of life changing. You know, you must have got at least 10 million personally from these exits. Like, how did that change you and how you approach life? Because yes, you don't go in startups with the mentality of exiting, but as founders, sometimes we hustle so much, we underpay ourselves, and then boom comes a waterfall of money. What was the psychological reaction to that?
Yeah, good question. I mean, look, my life did change, right? I did things that I wasn't able to do before that. But I used a lot of the capital to invest. I built my second company and invested a lot of my own money into that. And I guess it stood me in good stead, right? And so it has been life changing. But I think outside of that, just the whole experience has helped change my life because I've had time to myself. I've been less stressed. I've met incredible people. I've traveled. I've just had these great experiences. It's freed me from having to work for somebody else. It's so outside of the money. It's just and the experiences that I've had, just going through that whole process has just really enriched me as a person.
Right. Did you ever sometimes ponder that a lot of people, they dream about that daily and most of them never get to achieve that in a lifetime, even one exit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? It's difficult. Building a company is very, very difficult. 99% of companies fail. I think I read somewhere that only 3% of all companies get past 10 million revenue. It's very, very difficult. And to be honest, I think that even when I think about what I've learned and the experiences that I've had, it does help shape my thinking for decision making. But there are every single day challenges that occur even now that I haven't seen before.
Right.
Um, you know,
I guess the greatest benefit of all of that and what you're saying, if I can paraphrase, that's not necessarily the money, but it's the mountain that you climb and the skills that you acquire, the mental toughness, the emotional maturity, and all of that you acquire on the way there. And once you get there, it's like, okay, money's cool, but the main benefit was me growing so much on the way there, right?
exactly, 100%.
Super interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I also get the feedback sometimes of people living in, let's say, SF or New York or London, these expensive cities. First, like the cost of living there is super high. So 10 million might not be, well, it is a lot, but it might not be considered as much as if you would live, let's say, in Mexico. 10 million is worth 100 million here, for example. So my question for you, and I've been to London, amazing city, one of my favorite cities in the world. But you go on these streets which are filled with Rolls Royce and Ferraris and all that. Pretty sure you went through these as well. Do you often compare yourself to these folks and are like, oh yeah, that $10 million exit is nothing compared to this Nigerian prince which has 240 million net worth? Does that ever occur to your mind when you walk in these streets next to these fancy cars?
No, I've never thought about it. I've never owned a Rolls Royce. So I've never thought about it. It's everybody's on their own journey. Everybody's treading their own path, and everybody should be proud of that. Whether it's whatever it is. I've never been envious of people. I've never thought, oh, wow, he's driving this or living here or and
Not envious, but maybe does that motivate you? And do you think that the environment that you've been putting, which is like higher competition, higher level of quality of talent, do you think that has raised you to that point to get that 20+ million exit?
Not really, if I'm honest. I mean, I've got friends, people that I know that have been very successful, and they've got I don't know even what they call them, but you know, these like vision boards,
Right.
and they map out, you know, on their wall the things they want, and you know, I fully respect that. I've never been like that.
So
Um,
your geekiness is more like building something. Like what's your fire? What's that fire burning inside of you?
to learn, to challenge myself to, you know, to succeed, and
Love it.
you know, to kind of figure things out, to you know, go through adversity, and you know, every business is going to have challenges, and how can we navigate our way through them? Sometimes we're going to land at the top, and sometimes we're not. But you know, what can we do? And then you know, just what that does for me as a person, you know, the experiences that I get. I keep mentioning that word because for me, experience is the most important thing that I think any human being can have, right?
Right. That's why you mentioned travel, I guess. Like what else do you do in your free time? Do you climb mountains? Do you do Ironmans? Like how do you challenge yourself outside of work?
Yeah, nothing as adventurous as that. I'm afraid. I'm a martial artist, so I train and regularly compete all over the world, and so I'm, you know, I'm almost 50 now, but
Yeah.
I'm still
You look
actively
very young. You look very
competing.
good. What are the parallels between being in the ring and being in the business battlefield?
Well, I think one is, you know, you. I think because my life, when I think about my life, it's been solo, right? So I'm a single child. I don't have any siblings. I struggled when I was a kid. My father left. My mum brought me up on her own. She didn't have any money. I've been a martial artist, which is a single sport. I was a Thai boxer. I trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You know, these aren't really team sports. I've founded two companies on my own, um, and so I think that that whole single mentality of where you've just, you know, no one's going to do this for you, right? If you want something, you've got to make it happen yourself. You've got to learn, you've got to develop, you've got to grow, you've got to network, you've got to ask lots of questions, you've got to be curious, you've got to put a ton of hustle in, and nobody's going to do the hard work for you because this is not anybody else's game here, it's just yours. And it makes you realize that, you know, you've got to put the hard work in, and if you put
Right.
it in, you're more likely to get something out. What is interesting is now that I've co-founded DealPad, it's taken quite a lot of heavy lifting away from all the things that I was doing before, and it's nice to share, you know, some of the responsibility with somebody else. And it's, you know, I think I'm a very insular person,
Right.
and in my life, not that I've ever, it's not by design. I haven't meant to I haven't crafted my life so
Mm.
everything single. You know, I'm a single person, right?
Right.
I don't have a relationship at the moment. So, you know,
Right.
everything about my life is singular, and I think that it's not actually something that I'm proud of. It's not
Mm.
something that I wish that I had in me, but I just think you've got to accept who you are, and you've got to make the most of it. And I think
Right.
that I've done that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Would you describe yourself as radically independent?
Yeah, I would,
Okay.
no, but also not intentionally, right? And you know, I welcome. I've got a massive and a great, wonderful group of very close friends, but you know, I do a lot of things on my own still.
Okay. Because I describe myself that way too. But and radically implies probably 90, 95%, even 99% always do everything on my own. But I'm also like a team player. I also understand the value of other human beings, being in a long-term relationship with my wife, for example, and building out stuff with people. But I do agree with what you just said, that at the end of the day, it's all on you, right? Even my wife, you know, like it's the second person I trust the most in the world. Second to who? To myself, right? Who do
Yeah,
you trust? Who do you trust the more in this on this planet Earth? Me. I always deliver, always. You know, like no excuses, discipline is there. But the point I want to get into, because yesterday I listened to a naval podcast, you probably know Naval Ravikant, and he discussed with I think his name is Kamil Gupta or whatever. It was a cool conversation, and they said that as soon as someone comes up to you and asks for advice, how do you do copywriting, how do you do coding, for example, you kind of checkmate yourself, because if don't ask, go build, go try yourself. You have Google to answer your question, and that brought some resistance to me, because I run this podcast and I believe very much in taking the advice from others, but like not as a predominant part of my learning. I'm learning obsessed as you are. I believe mostly in building and putting that knowledge to work, all the time. That's my 95%. Still, I run these masterminds, I run this podcast. And I mean, you're a really successful guy. I'd ask you, to be my mentor, for example. But according to Naval, that would checkmate myself. I'm not fully in agreement with that part because yes, I'm biased. I have all of these things, but it's an interesting thought, isn't it? That like, yeah, as people that ask for advice, usually they're just not in a good place. They should have their head down and just build. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I disagree. I also think that people that give advice need to be very careful about giving advice because it impacts people's decision making. And I think that instead of giving advice, give experience, give a view. If you don't have experience of something, don't give advice. And so advice should always come from a place of experience and relevant to whatever you're advising on. I think that people should always ask questions. They should always lean in and try and extract the experience of others 100%. And that's how you learn. It's how you learn quicker. If you think about children, everything they learn comes from what they experience. And so I think as adults and grown-ups, we should always do the same thing, right? There are going to be people out there, no matter where we are, what we're doing, how successful we are or not, that have more experience than us in certain topics that can help us. And absolutely lean in and ask those people to share their experience. But I think there's a very distinct line between experience and advice. And right. and that can often, advice can often be quite damaging. Sharing experience can never be damaging.
Right. I also think it should come from a place of love, which sounds very vague. So let me be more precise on that. It should come in from a perspective that my glass is overflowing with abundance so that I can give to others. It shouldn't come from an empty glass that actually wants more water by giving advice. Half empty kind of glass, because a lot of people, they do that for this main reason, which is to attract more leads, right? Generate more followers and so forth. That's probably 80 to 95% of the advice that's given. This capitalist system, it kind of corrupts us subconsciously, although I have 99% good things to say about it. One negative thing is that it blurs the ethics and how you give advice to people. Most people give advice just for money, basically. So yeah, it needs to come from a good place, and a mentor most of the time won't ask for money. But yeah, obviously there's different cases to that. Let's talk a bit more about sales, because we've talked about your exits and you being a CEO, a founder. First, tell me about your Salesforce experience, because Benioff is such a trailblazer. Emerging markets, that's interesting. Also, like, you're in London, like most of these folks are in San Francisco. So tell us first about the Salesforce experience, and then like how working from London basically makes you kind of an outlier, if you want, compared to everyone that's in the Silicon Valley building SaaS.
Yeah, so Salesforce came about, and that was a while ago now. I was there 2007 to 2010, and it was between companies. So between me founding and exiting my companies, and so Salesforce was an opportunity for me as a software salesperson to really go in and work for a world-class software company. that was sales led, and so I was really intrigued and interested to learn. So for me, that period was a time of kind of steep development and just soaking up, what best practice looks like. How did a company like Salesforce operate? How did they go to market? What was their sales process, and how did they close these multi-million-dollar deals? And it was super interesting for me. And I think to the second part of your question, I've always, well, not always, that's not true. Since 2012, I've pretty much split my time between North America and the UK. So mainly on the East Coast and London. And so it's a bit of a hybrid for me. And that's helped me, I guess, kind of, hover across both ponds. And time zones. But yeah, so I haven't just been in London.
Are you friends with Johnny Hive?
No,
I'm reading a lot about him nowadays. He's a legend. Anyway, let's go with DealPad. What are you guys doing? You've been at it for 3 years now. You started that like literally in COVID. Tell us about that story.
Yeah, so DealPad came about basically as a culmination of my work as a sales leader and running sales teams and building revenue, and lots of founders particularly were coming to me and asking me, how they can align better with their buying teams. Software selling is getting more complex. They were unable to forecast properly and just asking me for my help. And so DealPad was born out of my experience running sales teams and what I wanted to have when I was at Salesforce and I was running sales teams. Essentially, what we do is we enable sellers to partner through the process with their buyers, so they can fully align on everything that needs to happen through that evaluation process, and centralize all of the sales materials and all the people that are required to go through that process together.
Right. And how's been the experience so far? Like, what's the strategy to that business? You told us that you don't have any exits in mind, but what's your broad strategy with that one? How do you integrate it with your current life plan? Even if you don't have a vision board, like where do you want to bring that one?
Yeah, well, I think this is this is almost an opportunity for me to bring my 20 odd years of experience to the table. I think my the companies I've previously founded have been more opportunistic, and this is more about domain expertise and really understanding the problem we're solving and who we're solving it for, and that gets me up in the morning, because I've lived and breathed what we're trying to do now, and the problems that we're trying to solve, and I've been frustrated with the inability to solve these problems for so long that actually it feels good to be able to help companies and sales teams solve those problems. That's what keeps me going. And I think that our goal is to obviously continue to grow. Most of our business is in North America today. We've still got a long way to go to get to where I think this business can has the potential to get to. We are only working with B2B software companies today. And we're passionate about helping that segment, but I think there are other markets out there that we can also move into.
How does one scale from 1 to 10 million?
Yeah, I think anybody can scrap their way to 1 million revenue. It's difficult, but it can be done. You can have lots of different customers paying you different amounts of money for different types of things and for different reasons. There's a lot of ways that you could scrape your way to 1 million. I think getting from 1 million to 10 is difficult. It's almost the hardest hump to get over. And it's a realization that you've got to grow up, and you've got to almost leave a high portion of the customers that have got you to where you are today behind, and stop supporting them as well as you are at the moment, because you are going to probably need to increase your ACV considerably, which then puts you into a different level. You're probably going to need security kind of compliance that you didn't have previously. You're probably going to need integrations that you hadn't thought about. And this brings with it a whole multitude of different challenges. Your customer, your ICP, is probably going to change, right? You're no longer talking to this segment, but you want to go up market and talk to a different segment now. You might have more buyers in your process. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that you're going to need externally, and then internally, you might not have an HR team, you might not have a finance team, you might not have a fully baked marketing function. You're going to need all these things, and so it's an understanding that you need to grow. I think the biggest lever to pull to get yourself from 1 to 10 is to just continually ask yourself what customers are buying from you. Because a million, you don't really know what are customers buying. And if you can nail that, you'll be able to go out and scale it. And at that point, you should be able to move yourself through that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you get to 6, you should get to 10. I see a lot of companies failing at 1 to 5. Like they just hover around 1, 1.5, 2 million, and they find it really difficult to get themselves past, and over that hump.
Right. You're referring to product market fit here, I guess, which is still like a bunch of people do not agree to the same definition, but let's say that I run a sales team right now and most reps are not hitting their quotas on my way to 1 million, let's say. Why would that be? What's the main reasons of failure for sales teams to hit their quotas?
Yeah, I mean, to 1 million, it could be anything, right? I mean, it could be absolutely anything. It could be the quality of the people. It could be the quality of the product. It could be the storytelling, the positioning, the fact that you don't have an integration that you really need that your competitors have. I mean, it could be a bunch of stuff. I think from once you hit that 1 million, it's usually that you're solving something that's still quite new, and you need to really educate the market. And so then there's an element that you need to bolt marketing onto this as well, because as a sales function, you're just not going to get there quickly enough. You need to really educate the market. Or it's just that you've hired the wrong people. And I think when you're scaling quickly and you just want to onboard people, the rigor that you use to be able to hire people sometimes drops. The level that you're hiring at previously, when you've got 1 or 2 salespeople, and you need to make sure that they're kind of A performers. If you need to hire 10 or 15 salespeople in a period of 6 months, sometimes that quality drops, and that becomes super painful. I think the other thing as well, when up to 1 million, a lot of sales are founder led, and they're derived from relationships. And to get yourself to scale, that can't be the case, right? So you can't expect a salesperson to come in, regardless of how experienced they are, unless and replicate what you've done as a founder, because it's just unfair. And I think that's a problem. That's a challenge that I see happen quite a lot. That you need to be able to have a repeatable sales process before you start scaling. You can't say, oh, we're at 1 million revenue, now let's hire a VP of sales, because you got to 1 million for a multitude of different reasons, and it's probably mostly founder led. The VP of sales comes in, they've done this for 10 years or so, and they're it's not their fault. So that's a very expensive mistake to make, and it takes a year or more to realize that that's happening, and then you're back to square one. One piece of advice that I give out a lot, that I definitely stand by, is that when you're hiring people, particularly salespeople, think about the journey you're on now for the next 18 months, not where you want to be. and hire people that have been through that journey. So, if we're at 1 million revenue and we want to get to 3 million in the next 18 months, I want to hire people that have been on that journey. I don't want to hire people that have been at a 10 million ARR SaaS company, right? I don't want to hire people that have been at a company that's scrapping around doing 100K revenue. I want to find people that have sold in an organization that have grown from 1 million to 3, because that is exactly the journey I'm on. If they can't get themselves to a place I need them to be in 18 months, when we're going to go from 3 to 10, then so be it. We'll part ways. And I hope over the period of 18 months, we can get them to where they need to be. But I want to hire people that have lived that specific journey that I'm on, particularly in sales. I spoke to a founder last week, and he said, "What do you think of this? This candidate? We're just about to hire them." And they were doing, I think they're doing about 1.4 million ARR, and this guy they're hiring is coming from Oracle. And I said, "Forget it, don't do it." And they all loved him. They've been through a process. They've met this person, 5 or 6 times, and thought he was brilliant. But I wouldn't have hired him. I don't know if they're going to hire him or not. But I wouldn't have hired that person, because they have no view. 9 years at Oracle is not going to help them in a 1.4 million startup. I can guarantee it.
Right.
And so that company now with 1.4 million, they can't afford to make expensive mistakes.
Right.
They need to grow, and I'm not sure the person they're going to hire is going to help them do it.
Sure. Also, I guess someone that has experience selling very similar softwares, targeting similar audience at similar price points, right?
I don't know, if I'm being really honest. I don't think it matters so much, because let's look at this. If you've got 2 companies, you've got one that's doing 1 million revenue and one that's doing 5. And let's just say that you're on 5 and you want to get to 10, and you hire someone that's done exactly, working for a competitor. So, doing 1 million revenues, and they've come in with in fact, let's do it the other way around. Let's say that you're doing 1 million, you're hiring someone in from that 5 million company, right? And they come in and they show you that this is what they've earned over the last 3 years consistently. And you think, great, top performer, have sold a competitive product. They've sold the same kind of ARR as us. They're going to be awesome. The chances are they're not, because that product at 5 million is probably a lot more well-baked and developed than the product I've got, right? They've got customer references, customer stories. They've got repeatable things happening in that business that they can call on to close those deals. They've got bigger teams. They've got a marketing function that's 3 or 4x bigger than the function I've got, and that's supporting the go-to-market. We don't have that. You have to factor all of these things in, right? And honestly, the difference is, has this person sold at 1 to 3 million? Have they been on that journey? Because that's the journey we're on. And I need someone that's been on that journey, because they're going to understand what we're going through, regardless of what they sell.
Sure.
And so I would always look, of course, the ideal is if you can find somebody that sold exactly like you've sold at the same ACV and at the same stage as you, and they can prove that they've consistently been a high performer, then brilliant.
Right.
But if I had to choose between one or the other, I wouldn't take the vertical or domain expertise. I would take somebody who's been on that exact journey that I'm about to go on for my company.
Yeah. Well, context is important, is the point, and yet the criteria number 1 is the ARR that they have scaled personally. My next and last question, because I know we're on time here, it all narrows down to the recruitment process in the end, because the challenge here, they've got like 6 meetings with the guy, but maybe that's all they have. Maybe they really suck at recruiting, like most companies. They don't know where to start. They don't know who to reach out to. They reach out to people that they know. Me personally, I use a lot of cold email and LinkedIn outreach. There's also LinkedIn job posts, but for example, I post jobs nowadays and I don't even look at the applicants. I only look at people that reach out to me personally on LinkedIn. It's an SDR role, so it makes a lot of sense to check things that way. Just like this podcast, it's also hard for me to find folks like you that actually walk the talk, because I could send you to a questionnaire, but if I send you to a questionnaire, you probably don't have time to fill it. So I prefer just the quantity and the speed approach, which is the underlying approach to pretty much everything I do, and then improve the quality by 1%, right? I talked to you today, my brain learns that Adam is a good profile, and then I'm going to get more of that in the future. So from a recruitment standpoint, what would you do exactly if you were that company? Would you send a shit ton of outreach to like potential 1,000 VP sales or CROs out there and try to interview like at least, I don't know, 30? Out of that 30, you have 10 second interviews, then it narrows down to like 3 candidates. Would that be the approach that you would use to find the right candidate?
I think it depends on the candidate and the level of the role that we're hiring for. So if it's SDRs, look, I think, we want junior people that are hungry, that are ambitious, that are curious, and we'll find them in a kind of a number of ways. If I'm hiring for somebody senior, whether it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's product, engineering, marketing, sales, finance, whatever it is, somebody that's going to make a significant contribution, or we need them to make a significant contribution, we will only hire people that we're referred to. So we'll go out into our joint networks. We'll ask people that we know to tap into their networks, and we want referrals. We want people to come into our business that are known to somebody in our network, and I think that it's a big risk going to an agency, a recruiter, going onto LinkedIn, putting an advert out, and getting random people coming through, trusting them on their CV and trusting that they can interview well. I want to know somebody that I trust that's worked with this person, or know somebody that has, and can refer them to me and can recommend them. And we will wait until we find the right person.
Interesting, which is kind of the opposite of the quantity speed approach. It's like more on the quality level, right? And on the unscalable level. But if you already have a couple of great employees that have been loyal, maybe you found them on LinkedIn initially, but they gain your trust, then yeah, maybe that seems like a good approach. Personally, I've gained tons of knowledge from that little call. So thank you for that, Adam. Where can people find out more about you online?
LinkedIn. So I'm Adam L. Baker on LinkedIn, and dealpad.io is the website for Dealpad.